We found out the elasticity in our market for coffee, the elasticity of demand, was negative 1.38. Well, what does that mean? Is that elastic, inelastic? We'll find out right now. So elastic goods, I like to think about drawing an E really fat, right? So an elastic good is going to have a really flat demand curve. Some examples of elastic goods are these elastic little hand slappy guys, right? You pay $0.25 for the machine when you're leaving Kroger, and you can get one of these little hand slapper guys, right? You can also get fast food, right? All these fast food hamburgers are going to be examples of elastic goods. Cereal, right? Breakfast cereal, there's all kinds of options, okay? And they're all relatively priced the same because they're elastic goods. And then we usually think about agriculture in most markets where we think of perfect competition, or think of elastic goods in those markets. So what does it mean to be elastic? Well, we have this flat demand curve, right, with this stretched out flat E for elastic, so it's a flat demand curve. We think about these slappy hands. It's $0.25 to get the slappy hand. If they raise the price to 26 cents, nobody's going to buy slappy hands because you can go get the little plastic football helmets for $0.25 or something else, right? You don't want to have $0.25 and a penny. You want to have just $0.25 to go ahead and get the slappy hands. If you think about fast food is usually the go-to example for elastic goods, right? The Big Mac is right around $4. If the Big Mac costs more than $4, people wouldn't be getting Big Macs. They'd go to Burger King and get a Whopper or a different kind of sandwich for lunch, right? Fast food is elastic because there's so many options. You can go get so many different things. So demand is going to change really quickly when we change the price. And that's what it means to be elastic. The opposite of that is an inelastic good. So for an inelastic good, I like to think about the letter I. It's just a vertical line. And an inelastic good is going to have a vertical demand slope. So we can see in this clip from the Shawshank Redemption that Andy has a very inelastic demand for this rock hammer that he wants. So we saw in that clip, Andy's demand for the rock hammer was pretty inelastic. He didn't really care what he had to pay Red, as long as Red was able to get him the rock hammer. Another example of an inelastic good would be something like electricity or internet connection, right? Especially right now, we all really need an internet connection to be able to take and facilitate our classes. So if the price of our internet went up a little bit, we'd still be willing to pay for the internet connection. And then a go-to example is healthcare, right? Recently, about a couple of years ago, EpiPen's price went way up. They went up about 500% within 3 months, right? So it was 5 times what it used to cost 3 months ago to purchase these EpiPens. And EpiPens are for people who may have allergic reactions. So if you think people with nut allergies or maybe a bee allergy, if you get stung by a bee and you're allergic to bee stings, it could swell up your throat and you wouldn't be able to breathe. So this pen actually helps your body from reacting to the things you're allergic to. It's used in emergencies to keep you alive. So if you need this thing to potentially survive, you'd be willing to pay almost anything for it. So that's why we're going to use this EpiPen as an example of an inelastic good, right? I'd be willing to pay almost anything for an EpiPen because without it, I will die, right? So what would you be willing to pay for another minute of life, right? If you're going to die within the next minute, or you could live for another 70 years, you'd probably be willing to pay everything you have just to not die within the next minute. And that's kind of the example here of the EpiPen. It's very inelastic demand. It's almost straight up, right? It doesn't matter what the price is, I'm going to pay it. And so will everybody else. So the demand curve is pretty much straight up. Just to recap, we have E for elastic and I for inelastic. The E is stretched out really fat, and the I is just a straight vertical line, just like an inelastic good. And we see that here with elasticity, right? It's the change in quantity over the change in price. The change in quantity is going to be on our x-axis. The change in price is going to be on our y-axis, and that's why we have a fat for elastic and a skinny for inelastic. So what does this minus 1.38 mean that we found for the elasticity of demand in our coffee market? Well, if the absolute value of our elasticity is greater than 1, we know that a good is elastic, right? Because the change in quantity is going to be bigger than the change in price. So if the change in quantity is bigger, we're going to be moving further along the x-axis than we are along the y-axis. And that would mean our elasticity would be greater than 1. If the elasticity is less than 1, then we're inelastic, right? That just means our change in quantity is less than our change in price. So we have an inelastic good. And if the absolute value is equal to 1, then we know we're unit elastic. So the change in quantity equals the change in price. And that's called unit elastic.